37 years. 37 years. Like, you imagine the third week of January in 1998, and you're thinking, where am I going with this? You talk about persistence. Like, this guy deserves a Nobel Peace
It's what
Prize.
it takes.
It's crazy to think 37 years. Hey, everyone. Welcome to our latest TDR Psychedelic Exclusive. Hope you're enjoying a great week. Obviously, a great week for the industry with MAPS' latest data, as it's really ignited this overall industry. As we have more and more of the best thought leaders in the space, which we welcome in a familiar face to our podcast. He is the president of the Healing, CRE, the Healing REIT. Cody Shandraw, good to see you again.
Good to see you, boys. Glad to be back, especially on this high note.
Yep.
I know. Anthony Verrill, good to see you. Following the markets closely.
It's good. We've got psychedelics and cannabis are finally doing what they're supposed to be doing for the past. Our thesis has been right. It was just a fucking year early. Starting to play out, which is good.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking a little bit about some cannabis executives this week, Cody, and man, oh man, that conference at Bazenga back in Miami, it was pretty grim, but there's a big conference coming up in a week and a half in Chicago. Sentiment's going to be a lot different, but for us, where we handle both cannabis and psychedelics, we were looking for some sort of like corner that we could turn for a number of months. Didn't know where this was going.
Number of months. It's almost been 2 years.
It's been
and it's happened all at the same time, which is exciting. So let's begin news. Obviously, yesterday, or I should say earlier this week, where Nature Medicine finally published the MDMA-assisted therapy phase 3 results from MAPS. Results, needless to say, were incredible.
Amazing.
Probably the biggest takeaway, and I wanted to quote this, and I said this actually in a podcast with Peyton Nyquist earlier this week. It said, quote, by the end of the study, 86.5% of people in the MDMA group achieved a measurable reduction in severity of symptoms. Researchers reported about 71% of the MDMA group improved enough that they no longer met the criteria for PTSD diagnosis. So I know we were hoping for positive results. Did this meet or even surpass your expectations?
In my opinion, it surpassed. Obviously, I think the last one was 67%. But really, what's missing there, okay, is I think a lot of people don't realize the placebo is 14.8%.
Yeah.
So let's put that in context of what that number means, how significantly meaningful that was to see, and obviously, you're talking about a patient population, number one, right? That is a lot of comorbidities, and a lot of times, whether it's, alcohol. There was a really interesting conversation that I won't name drop who I had it with, but think about this. The NIH, I think it was 19 or 22%, I'd have to check, of males and females with alcohol and drug use disorders have a PTSD diagnosis.
Oh, yeah.
They do. Wow.
So now...
it's nasty. PTSD is some nasty stuff.
So now when you're looking, okay, like at, we've been having calls with companies that we'll see some press releases on very shortly, but I honestly, like if you would have asked me 12 months ago who our target company was going to be building up all of these new ketamine and MDMA centers for, I would have told you it's the guys that are mainly operating ketamine. I don't know, man. I think it's going to be the drug and alcohol rehabs. I think it's going to be those inpatient facilities. Another one, eating disorder companies. We talked to a lot of eating disorder companies. 50% of every single patient, NIH website stat, everybody can go check this, that have been admitted to residential treatment centers have a pre-existing PTSD diagnosis.
So how does that
PTSD?
How does that change how does that change the model, or how are you modeling for that? If your I guess tenant profile is changing, is it the same, or is it creating a much more addressable, a much larger addressable market?
Different. It has literally more than quadrupled our TAM.
Yeah.
I mean,
wow.
And remember, guys, we've done zero marketing for this at all.
Yeah.
All the inbound, I would say 90% of it are literally those two industries that are waiting and watching. Because listen, what are these companies, right? They're legacy businesses, have been around for a long time, are already treating patients. The success rate, especially for drug rehab programs, as we all know, are anemic at best.
Yeah.
So I honestly think that, while there's going to be, some large ketamine companies that end up are very fast movers and adopters because a lot of their therapists have already gone through the MAPS training or the numinous training protocols. But I think that a majority of the industry is going to be dominated by, the drug and alcohol, the eating disorder, and also the domestic abuse survivors.
So then is from the client's perspective, I mean, are they creating satellite offices or satellite clinics that specialize in psychedelic assisted therapy that they can opt to put patients in, or are they integrating this into their current infrastructure?
Dude, they're integrating this into their current infrastructure. Like we're looking at a facility right now on hospital property, okay, that it is an eating disorder center that we're literally going to be going in, buying that building, renovating the first floor of that building, enabling it to have the MDMA treatment there.
Okay.
Right on hospital grounds.
And I'm assuming since PTSD layers into these potential eating disorders and addiction centers, it's going to be considered on label for the use of MDMA. So there'll be no friction there either.
And listen, you have companies that are used to billing already, used to working with insurance companies, fully staffed out. Like you look at kind of the 6 to 8 hour window, right? While you're going through these sessions, I wonder what percentage of people are going to want to go to these types of inpatient type of facilities where they're there for 30 days. They're getting their 96 hours of talk therapy. They're getting their 3 MDMA treatments. Dude,
So this becomes integrated in almost the rehab model. You're not doing like an outpatient procedure where I go to the office.
Eating disorders are the exact same thing. It's inpatient.
So these are actual facilities you're checking into, and then the MDMA assisted therapy is part of the regimen of, let's say, the 30-day program. Okay, that's genius.
I'm telling you, man, I really like, looking at this in 2019 and 2020, I would have never imagined the types of companies that we're talking to right now reaching out to us for these things. It's shocking, to be honest. The question.
So we're gonna look at like this clinical model as both an inpatient and outpatient model. You're thinking,
I really think that there's going to be some creative programs developed by some of these leading edge operators and clinicians. I think that there are going to be 2 or 3 very distinct types of programs.
Well, think about it. When you have an inpatient clinic rate, like this current model, I don't know what the relapse rate is. I think it's obviously pretty high.
I think it's over 90% in a 12-month period.
Yeah. So if you have an inpatient 30-day and you're getting this kind of data, that's only going to manifest, right?
I mean, imagine how much higher that number probably would be had those people been in a center specifically dedicated towards this treatment. I mean, it gets really interesting, man. I'm going to be very curious
because you're checked in. You're not going to go get an 8-hour session, drive home, go back to normal life. Now it's integrative. I mean, I'm assuming there's 3 sessions that are staggered within the 30-day regimen that considers rehabilitation, and then it's billed to insurance and you're on your way.
It's going to be, the question is, right, like, does this NDA filing happen, maybe November, December, the FDA grants priority review and approval possibly mid-2024? I don't know, man.
That'd be
so
nice.
You think it will be? Yeah.
Could be.
So mid 2024 still seems realistic, like to get fast track for legalization. You're thinking?
I think so. I do. If I was a betting man, I would probably bet approval next year. I've talked to a lot of people that still think it's 2025, but I mean, obviously, listen, look at my portfolio. I'm a gambler,
You're classified, obviously, institutional investor. You have run Ambria Capital. You invested a lot of money in this space. So what's next then, you think, for like MAPS? Like we've seen some notable names like the Steve Cohens of the world cut checks to MAPS. This is before the actual data was released. We look at Compass Pathways, which had a share purchase agreement for north of $250 million with some pretty sophisticated investors for a phase 3 that's beginning. Now you have a phase 3 that's complete, and the data pretty much speaks for itself. So what's next?
With everything that has transpired over the last 12 months, and especially over the last 7 days, I would probably guess that MAPS goes public. I don't see how. Listen, the access to capital, while is available for a private company, and while the public markets have been volatile to say the least over the last year, I just, looking at a commercialization strategy for this company, and I hate to draw parallels because ketamine and MDMA are so different, but look at the process that Spravato had to go through to become the blockbuster drug it's on pace to become. The clinical infrastructure side was the most important. I think when that launched, there were maybe 300 clinics in the United States that were offering that. Today, there's over 2,700 of them.
Wow.
So when I'm looking at this and, you're looking at the drug reps for MAPS going out after this drug has been approved and they look to begin commercializing this, it's going to be a heavy lift, man. So, I really do think that just having access to quick capital, whether it's through some type of debt facility or some type of revolving line of credit or, I don't know exactly what structure, but the public markets for quick access to capital is going to make the most sense to me. And seeing that data, I think that the excitement alone that they would be able to generate from traditional biotech pharma type of investors that maybe didn't exist on the fringe side of what this was the last couple of years for guys like me to be able to cut checks into, I think that that's where this goes. So I do think they go public.
I mean, do you see it being compelling enough to where maybe pharma just scoops up MAPS and just shelves them and then just rolls it out themselves at this point?
Could be. I mean, I guess the question becomes,
too early to tell.
Yeah.
No, I think the question becomes around the intellectual property side, right? Like,
correct.
You look at that exclusivity. So let's go back to Spravato. And again, I hate to use this, but looking at Spravato, everybody knows the company that developed that drug. Everybody knows the company that commercialized that drug.
Yep.
And that still took a little bit to go. Depending on what the exclusivity is for MAPS with MDMA, remember, I to my knowledge, unless there's something that I'm missing, I don't know if it's that long of a window, but if it takes that long to commercialize and reach billions of dollars in sales, does a pharma company come in? I don't know. Or do they wait for that window to be developed? The exclusivity period is over. They can go commercialize a generic, and all the heavy lifting, the infrastructure side, the real estate side is built out. The clinics are there. I don't know. It's an interesting. I'm not smart enough to give an opinion on that. So
no, I know, I hear you.
It's an interest. It's going to be really, because listen, I tell you what, if I'm Compass right now, if I'm Usona right now, if I'm one of these other guys and I'm looking at this, holy shit, what an amazing opportunity. MAPS was first through the door, 30 years of work, decades of time, effort, energy. But what are they going to do? They're going to develop the commercialization route of how these things are actually gone out and marketed towards doctors, therapists, things of that nature. And all of the critical infrastructure where these treatments are going to take place are going to be built for when my drug is ready to go. Yeah. So, I really don't know. I guess is the best answer, man. I listen.
You imagine this guy, 37 years. Like, you imagine the third week of January in 1998, and you're thinking, where am I going with this? You talk about persistence. Like, this guy deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. Like, crazy to think 37 years.
Dude, and then look at the other companies. Look at imagine putting 37 years of your time in and then seeing other companies that are literally brand new out of the gate raising hundreds of millions of dollars. You're like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
When I see it's kind of surreal. Have you seen that Netflix series Painkiller?
Yeah, I have, man. That's dark.
That's hard to it's hard to watch.
It's very dark, very hard to watch, but it, is surreal to think drugs like that are options for people. And you understand what the predicament and what we're dealing with right now, how this was flat out an epidemic before even COVID hit. And COVID obviously put addiction to the forefront. But, this has all the makings to be a movie written about Rick Doblin and what he's done, especially if, people's lives do improve. But getting back to like possibly seeing like if this company, let's say, does go public, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but would this not, based on the data alone, be one of the biggest IPOs that we've seen in a while?
It will be the biggest. Industry wise, like specifically in tactogen side, this will be the biggest ever, 100%. I don't think a tire compass even hold a stick to what this is, because
No.
I'm going to have to imagine that the valuation is going to be so attractive for so many people because, again, outside of looking at the VA system and things of that nature, look at some of the things we were talking about: drug and alcohol addiction,
huge business,
eating disorders, domestic violence, abuse survivors. I mean, police, firefighters. The TAM on this is unbelievable. But it gets back again, the critical infrastructure side, 16, dude, to treat 1 million people, 16,000 centers need to be built.
Well, you guys bring up a point.
For 1 million people?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
You bring up the parallels of addiction with PTSD. I was actually in a podcast with Anthony Tennyson from Awaken, and he was saying that there's as many as 15 million Americans suffer from alcohol use disorder. And I know currently right now there's between 13 and 15 million Americans that are suffering from PTSD. So clearly, as you said earlier here in this interview, that the two and two go hand in hand.
Yeah, imagine if a quarter of all of those people that have alcohol use disorder are undiagnosed for PTSD or have a pre-existing PTSD condition and just didn't report it when they said they had an alcohol use disorder.
Yeah.
I mean,
so how is this affecting, like, basically your healing rate, as far as the clinical model as to what you're building out? Like, just when you thought you're busy, you're going to get real busy. How does this play out and roll out?
We had a lot of inbounds, as you could probably imagine, over the last 24 hours since
I'm sure
that's been published. So, again, the evolution of the types of clinicians and the practices that we're talking to has greatly changed over the last 90 days. I have been very, very surprised, as I mentioned, the types of operators that we're speaking to regarding this. But the good news is, for all of the ketamine clinics right now, they're moving, let's say a company that's doing $73 million in EBITDA a year. Okay, that's running 23 centers across the country.
Yeah.
Getting that shifted over to MDMA is going to take a pretty good deal of time.
Yeah.
The huge advantage these ketamine clinics are going to have is smaller footprints, much faster, to move and actually adjust and evolve to make their practices capable to bring in this type of therapy. And like I said, these guys have been on the tip of the spear. They've seen where this is going to go over the last couple of years. That's why a lot of these companies already have their therapists trained for this. So it's going to be, I don't think a lot of the smaller guys, just from an access to capital point, I mean, some of these people that we're talking to, specifically in the behavioral health space, that have been acquired for hundreds of millions of dollars over the last 36 months. The access to cash for these guys, it's going to be difficult to compete, some of the smaller ketamine players in the space.
Yeah, I mean, with the larger healthcare stuff, you're talking about platform plays with private equity getting involved. I mean, they're gonna, if you tell them, hey, we got 23 centers, we need to juice the CapEx, but here's the return on the back end. It's write the check, get the work done, and let's roll.
Here's $250 million. Go open another 20 centers that do the exact same what we're doing right now, but also adding on another tool to the toolbox.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea as to how many therapists out there have definitely jumped on board and want to learn more over the last, say, like you said, month, 2 months?
I heard that there is in the thousands a waiting list of therapists to be trained.
Wow.
I mean, I'd be jumping on top of this if I was a therapist. If I was an occupational therapist, psychiatrist, I mean, adding this to your arsenal. And then, I mean, not only from a monetary perspective, but also from the utility that it's bringing patients. I would want to be integrating this into my practice. I don't know how you can make an argument to where clinicians shouldn't be integrating this into their practice.
The only thing is talking to some of the smaller doctors, that have run very successful practices, maybe team of 5-6 guys, their wives are keeping the books for them. They're not, giant corporations. The problem that they have is listen, I would need to shut down my business for a couple months. I would need to redo a piece of my building to have this therapy conjunctive. So what I think, talking about that 2-3 model type of deal, I think you're going to start seeing giant referral networks start setting up between doctors that are treating patients for PTSD right now, that they're going to develop. You're going to see like a hub and spoke model where you're going to have these giant treatment hubs with these big centers. And then there's going to be all these small offshoots where maybe the talk therapy is done at a smaller center and then the treatment is done at the bigger one. So I think, like I said, I think everybody's going to be very surprised at how many different ways this is going to be done in.
Yeah. So let's bring this all together. Go ahead. I was going to say, let's bring this all together. Like, with this news, does this benefit the entire industry, or do you think it's more specifically the companies that are involved in MDMA?
Listen, obviously a rising tide lifts all boats. Let's be very clear about that. I think from an industry-wide perspective, showing that these molecules have the desired effect. That's why these clinical trials and this data, again, very expensive game. You need to have a lot of capital to do that. But listen, if you can prove out what you're stating, I think that this only solidifies. And then listen, look at the deals that it takes. Like, I'm going to talk about just looking high level at what type of reputation some of these bigger companies are trying to build, whether it's the Mindset Natsuka deal and pharma entering the space, whether it's the Cybin and small pharma deal and combining intellectual property portfolios. Like, listen, this is going, I think that this is just a confluence of events that is just going to continue to snowball. So while some of the public companies right now may not benefit on their stock prices being lifted, talking about the companies that are specifically involved in MDMA, look at Numinous. I mean, look at the move that they had. I think that a lot of the companies that are focused specifically in that vertical are going to have substantial increases, not only in valuation, but also in interest, whether it's from a training aspect or real estate aspect like us, whether it's an SOP and manual thing. I think that, the companies that are directly related to MDMA are going to substantially benefit, but the other ones will. It's just maybe not at the same level that the ones that are directly involved are going to.
I just think with Numinous, and full disclosure, they're a client of ours and we do hold a position with them. I think the question right now remains, like, everything on paper seems great as far as the partnership with MAPS. That burn rate is still a concern for some. And it's just like, I don't know, if there's, stuff they're working on in the background, but at the end of the day, it's like, how do you run this company up until the FDA approves MDMA, which is still another 9 months away?
If I'm, that team, I'm looking to offload assets even at a loss right now that are costing me money that are non-near-term revenue generating assets. Like, what's the most important thing? Listen, I can promise you that based on that data, I bet you that their training is probably going nuts right now, their signups. It has to be crazy, the people that are probably reaching out to them. So, I don't know. I guess it's the chicken or the egg thing, right? Like, do you look at that long-term prospect of some of the other things that they're developing, or do you really cement your position as the leader in the training side of this business, as in setting up? Remember, they're doing clinical trials, right? They know how these clinics are supposed to run and operate and what the future of commercialization looks like for this. That knowledge is going to be invaluable, in my opinion.
One thing I'm seeing in this industry, similar to Cybin wants to be classified, I think, as the industry leader in research towards DMT. I think that's a telling tale. Like, did they believe in their portfolio prior to that acquisition? Many can ask, but at the end of the day, the deal is done. But we've kind of had this discussion before. I think less and less companies are going to be around, but for the ones that have the strong IP, potential mergers and acquisitions, and for those long-term sustainable runways, tremendous, obviously, opportunity for the players that are going to be left within this space.
Yeah, and listen, I think it's a function. I'm telling you, I look at this, even the companies that are housing, look at small pharma, amazing intellectual property portfolio. That thing sold off 90%. Okay. Even the ones with very strong intellectual property portfolios, again, man, this gets down to a function of how much money are you going to be able to raise. So in my opinion, even having a very strong IP portfolio if you're going to keep diluting down, I mean, how valuable of a prospect, I wouldn't be shocked if you start seeing more deals. I mean, listen, we were beating the drum for Mindset a year ago together. I mean, if you can find somebody that is a large pharma player that can maybe cover some of those early, trial costs, I think that's non-dilutive to the shareholders. I think something like that is going to be the future. Like, dude, look at all the small biotechs. A lot of them have R&D agreements with large pharma.
That's what Awaken. That's what Awaken's doing with the what is it, NHS or NIS?
Yeah.
I mean, me personally, I mean, my only holding is Numinous in this space, and it's because I see it as a picks and shovel play. It's not a drug development. I mean, it's not going to take. Well, I mean, I hope it doesn't take 4 to 5 years to recognize value. And I mean, it's not guessing, because I mean, Atai looks amazing on paper, but then people look at it. You look at the cash position, and you're like, how the hell are they actually going to pull any of this off? That's simple math, and it just doesn't make sense. They're going to have to do another big raise in the future. A very large raise.
Yeah.
Cody, you are well versed, being an investor both in cannabis and psychedelics. When you look at these two verticals, as far as like the investment opportunity, like, again, we've talked about this data from MAPS. We actually had one of your board members, Wiz Buckley, on. Love that guy. He was saying recently that once these MAPS data are released, it's going to blow open the doors, the floodgates, and actually break down the Hoover Dam. If you look at both spaces, he thinks that psychedelics is going to be a much bigger opportunity than what cannabis is. How do you view it? Or do you even like look at or compare the two? Like, how big do you think this industry has potentially to be?
It's very difficult for me to draw comparisons. The only thing is, maybe from an investor standpoint, that if you're early enough to any emerging industry, obviously some of the winners are going to be big ones. So that's about where I draw the line. Obviously looking at what our country spends on healthcare, this was so different, right, from cannabis, where cannabis, the Trojan horse, was kind of the medical side led direct, right? Like, everybody knew that was the end point. Where this, I kind of feel, was the exact opposite. You had a very small group of people that were recreational users that drove the medicalization side to go through. So I don't know, man. I look at the cost benefit. I mean, I think the average, they're attributing like the cost benefit to treating someone with PTSD. Let's just use MAPS. It's like $73,000 per person. You know what I mean? What's your average cannabis user spend a year? But is the market for cannabis users much larger than the medical indications for PTSD? So I don't know. That's, let's sit back in 10 years and we can have this conversation again.
It's exciting for both industries. You had the MAPS news yesterday, earlier this week, I should say. NBC News obviously talking about how Republicans are warming up to the idea for SAFE, Anthony, regarding to cannabis, but all is well now in the industry. And I can't, I'm smiling because there's tremendous opportunities, but clearly investors from both industries have been re-engaged, to say the least.
I swear, the safe banking thing, I'm so sick of having this conversation, dude. It's so painful. It's very painful.
Before I let you go, I have to admit, I was on your Instagram handle recently, but who won that skeet shooting tournament that you and Carcillo were at?
Destroyed him again.
Did you?
Oh, God, I got him by like 20 birds,
So him being an athlete, does he jab you or whatever?
Oh, dude, listen, we bust each other's chops. That's why I love him. So listen, I will not hang out with people if I can't, you know what I mean? If we can't have that banter going back and forth, I have no interest. It means absolutely nothing to me. But I will give it to him though. Okay. He beat me at pool for the first time ever 2 weeks ago. And then beat me again the other day. So he's got me in the last 2 games of pool. So I'll give him that.
Oh, so you're a sharp pool player.
I'm decent, here and there.
But skeet shooting's your thing, huh?
Yeah, I mean, listen, man, my grandfather was a member at like 3 gun clubs while I was growing up. So
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I did a lot of shooting while I was a kid. And I love it, man. Like, we took 2 of the guys from Meridian out 2 weeks ago, and they were like, dude, this is amazing. It's like, listen, you gotta think, you're out, it's like golfing, man. You're out there for 3-4 hours, you're doing 20 different stations, everybody's shooting 6 or 8 times, you get to talk a lot of shop, it's quiet, you're outside. Like, I mean, it's a great thing. I'm really surprised. Like, it's funny, I talked to some of the older guys, like on the real estate side, and he was like, dude, he's like, it was a natural thing. When I was younger, getting into the business, the guys would go out, they'd go duck hunting, they'd go pheasant hunting, they'd go quail hunting. It was like, it's a generational thing that just shifted on. He was like,
I mean, you're up there. We need to get a podcast going and go out and kill some hogs.
Telling you, man.
That's about to start. That's about to
sounds like a start.
And listen, hog hunting, for example, great thing to do. Listen, you go donate that meat to local food banks if you don't, whatever you don't want to take. So listen, I'm normally a big bacon guy, so take the belly, take a back strap, and then you donate the rest of it. So dude, like, listen, not only are you helping out in the multi-billions of dollars of agricultural damage those things are doing down here, then you're also donating food. And you're going out with the guys to team bonding experience. Like, listen, man, I tell everybody, go hunting one time. I've taken probably 30 people hunting for their first times in their lives for all different types of things. Elk, deer, turkey, pheasant, like you name it. I've probably taken somebody for their first time in every single animal.
That's fun.
And that bond that you develop from being out there alone is a different, especially like, Colorado, for example, Dan's Carcilla's first time hunting ever. Okay.
Really?
Dude, seeing mountain lion tracks when you're in the mountains and there's nobody or nothing around.
That's so surreal.
Yeah, man. Like, that's you have a little bit
There's some wild videos of guys out hiking up on the mountains. One guy actually had to shoot and kill one, and then one guy was chased.
Yeah.
Remember, he's like, "Get back!" Did you see that video?
With his kid.
It's what I've told my wife. When my wife is like, "So what if we see a mountain lion?" I go, "Babe, we're not going to see him. He's going to be seeing us."
Yeah.
Way before.
Yeah.
Have you seen one in the mountains?
I haven't.
Cody?
From far away, probably. So we were at probably 8,000 feet in elevation, and the mountain across from us, it was just cruising on the ridge. So probably, I don't know, 3,000 yards away. But you could just, like, they move different. I mean, dude, imagine.
How big are they? They 200 pounds?
They're big cats.
Yeah.
Are they big?
Yeah, huge, dude.
Full grown, they're big cats. They'll take you down easily.
No kidding.
Yeah. Like, I heard a story from one of the guys that I used to go duck hunting with. Dude, he moves to Montana, okay? Has an 8-foot tall fence. A mountain lion jumped up over that fence, grabbed his German Shepherd by the head with the dog in its mouth, jumped back over that 8-foot fence, and took off.
Yeah.
Like, dude, those are different things.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, there's a reason why people are scared of monsters in the nighttime, because there used to really be monsters that used to eat people in the night. Like, different thing.
I was up at Torch Lake, Michigan, end of July. I was going to text you and Dan. I was at this huge sandbar and just a party of 50 people, and they got 311 Emerald cranked. So for all of our viewers, we were in Denver back in June, and we're at your Airbnb. But anyway, long story short, I hadn't heard that song in 20 years, and I think we played that over and over for about 2 days straight. But there I was, and I'm like, oh, man, I got to text these guys. But
listen, everybody sees the fun recorded on the podcast. It's the in-between when each person's recording that you're getting to sit around and shoot the shit and laugh and talk about what's coming next. That's where, a lot of that magic is, man.
Absolutely. Well, listen, summertime's over. Time to go to work, but some exciting news to say the least this week for Psychedelics. But please, best of luck going forward, and let's keep in touch.
I appreciate it, boys.
Talk soon.
So what'd you all think of the interview? Did you like what we recorded with our guests? Then leave a comment below and let us know what you thought of it. And if there's any more questions you want us to ask, as usual, share this video with your network. Click on that bell for all notifications. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel, because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.